Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary with a knife video for you. I've got a fixed blade today. This is the Schrade SCHF 52. Now, I'm not going to have a lot of comparisons in this video because I want to do a whole video where I just compare this knife with the BK9 and the SE6. So that's coming up down the road. This will be sort of the standalone review of this knife all on its own. Okay, so just by way of introduction, I should say I was interested in this because of kind of its background. Initially, what I was going to buy, a year and a half ago or so, was the Schrade SCHF 36. Now or 37, I'm sorry, that was the bigger one. Before I pulled the trigger on that, I started hearing and even seeing some pictures of this knife as sort of the follow-up to it and hearing about some of the improvements. So I thought, you know what, I'll wait and see what happens and how this whole thing works out. Once I started seeing actual reviews of this and stuff, I was like, yeah, I think it's worth waiting for. So I waited until these were available in stores, which by the way, took some time. And even now, these are not widely available. I searched Amazon.ca today and found nothing. Now on Amazon.com, you probably have better luck. You may or may not find them on eBay. They seem to go from week to week. There'll be some available and then some not. SR Knives and Warriors and Wonders in Canada, they sometimes have them and then sometimes not. So even still, it's not a guaranteed thing that you'll be able to find one of these if you go out to buy it. And I think that's more just production numbers than it is. I don't think they're just so wildly popular that they're flying off the shelves. I just think there's not a lot that maybe were produced initially. So I could be wrong. Maybe everyone is dying to get one of these and they're selling out as soon as they get in stores. That's possible. All right, now let's get back to what we want to say. So that's my introduction. So it took me some time to get this, although I do think it was worth waiting for the improvements on this over the SCHF 37. Let's go ahead and, one last thing to say. I got the rubberized handle. It does come, or you can get it with a micarta handle, but it's a little thicker. So this seemed like the better option to me, and I'm very, very happy with it. Size and weight on this. Let's start there. This is a pretty bulky knife. Weighs in with the sheath at about 1.5 pounds, 1.7 ounces. Without the sheath, you cut that down to just over 1 pound. Okay, so but 1 pound is still pretty heavy for a knife. And the balance is actually quite good on this. So even though it is heavy, it's not extremely onerous to try and go ahead and use this for doing things. Okay, so that's the weight. Overall length, 12 3/4 inches, 7-inch blade, basically 6-inch handle. Quite comfortable, and the blade stock on this is about 1/4 inch, so very, very thick blade stock. Let me zoom in while I tell you about the knife, and then we'll zoom back out to talk about the sheath and the extra things that come with this. Okay, let me get myself out of frame. There we go. Okay, so there you go. That's the knife in close-up. This blade, of course, is a drop point with a hollow grind, sort of a saber grind on it. You do have this nice choil, and it does have a black coating. Now, a lot of the videos I saw of this, it looked like the coating was textured, like you might get on an SE. It's not. It's actually quite smooth. And I will say this, the coating did not affect my use of a ferro rod at all. It worked just fine. It has worn a little bit as I've done some batoning and chopping and stuff like that. Now obviously whittling and stuff isn't going to wear the coating too much. But when you're batoning this through a log that's squeezing really tight, you're going to get a little bit of wear. Okay, so the coating is fine, totally passable. It's 1095 stainless, so the coating is appreciated to keep corrosion down at least. Now, the blade on this, I'm going to say this. I like the fact that it's a hollow grind because of that very thick stock. I find a hollow grind gives you good edge geometry, and this knife does strike a pretty good balance. And I say pretty good because it's only a so-so chopper, but it also can cut. So one of the things I did a number of times is I would take one log or one, maybe not a log, but I'd take about a 3-inch piece of wood, maybe 4-inch, baton it down, right down to kindling, and then take that kindling and make fire sticks and get a fire going. And that's you know, one of the tests I find for a survival knife, that's one of the things you're going to want to do. I've done a little bit of cutting, and I will say, because of the hollow grind and because it's sort of a mid grind there, saber grind, this is not going to work as, say, a camp knife where you're going to be cutting food or preparing, you know, skinning an animal that you've killed. Not very suitable for those kind of tasks, okay? Let's see here. Otherwise, very tough. Lots of material headed out to the tip on that. All right, and the finger choil does make for a well-balanced, very controllable knife, even though it's fairly heavy. Now, let's move to the handle, and I'll stay zoomed in for this. You can see it's a rubberized handle. This handle is really, really comfortable. And I purposely, everything that I did with this knife, I did with no gloves, just with bare hands. And I had no hot spots, no issues whatsoever, no discomfort, nothing like that. One of the things I will say, I was kind of doing a supplemental test where I wanted to see if, you know, in bad circumstances, if my hands were pretty cold, could I still get a fire going using a ferro rod? So that's a test I'll talk about in a different video, but so I did use this in pretty cold temperatures with bare hands and didn't have too many problems with it. Very comfortable. Now let me say this though. This handle, because of that hook on the handle, you can really get a lot of momentum behind this blade as you swing it. And because of that, I actually wish there was a 9-inch version of this knife. And that, you know, that extra 2 inches would make it about the same size as a BK9. This handle seems to be just made perfectly for heavy chopping. And I mean, with a 7-inch blade, you can get some chopping done, but with a 9-inch blade, you would, you know, it would be replacing a hatchet. It would work extremely well. And this handle would allow you to chop just crazy a lot. Now, let me back out here and say, you know, overall, as I've used this knife, I find it a pretty good, pretty balanced knife, especially for the price. These are fairly budget friendly, okay? And you're getting pretty well everything you would need in a survival knife at a pretty budget friendly price. Let me say that when I first got this, the grind, the actual secondary grind here was not even. I've got it pretty close now, but I with this stuff, I'm fairly, you know, what I did was I used it a bit from the factory until I really got it dull. Then I hit it with the diamond stones on the sharp maker to reprofile it a bit. Once I got it sharp, I used it again, and then I've sharpened it again. So, you know, rather than just sit there for a long time and wear myself out trying to reprofile a blade, I always do it sort of in segments, so it's a little more comfortable in terms of the amount of work involved. All right, so overall, yeah, very tough, very usable knife. And it, like any knife of this genre, it's sort of trying to be a jack of all trades, master of none. And it falls into that category. It will cut, it will slice, it will chop, but it doesn't chop as well as, say, a BK9. It doesn't slice as well as, you know, your paramilitary 2. But it will do what's needed. Okay, now let's bring the sheath in here and add that to our discussion. There we go. It is just, you know, a nylon sheath, nothing special about the sheath material. It does work really well. It kind of, either you can put your belt through that, or you can actually attach it afterward. Either way works well, and I've done both just for the purposes of checking it out. You guys know, if you're wearing a tactical belt, it can be a pain in the neck to take on and off multiple times. So I like this feature, especially for those times where you're driving somewhere and then you're going to hike out into the bush. Well, if you've driven there, you're kind of partially ready to go. Then you can kind of strap this onto your belt. It does come with a ferro rod and a little piece of steel here to strike the ferro rod. Okay, this is steel, it's not magnesium or anything like that. And it also comes with a sharpening stone. And the sharpening stone actually works okay. It's not a fine grit stone, it's pretty coarse. But for the kind of knife this is, that's completely acceptable. And if you didn't want these in here, you could take these out and put other survival items in here. But for me and my purposes, this setup works just fine. The sheath is very comfortable. The retention is fairly good, okay, but here's what here's my complaint about the sheath. It'll bind just a little. Watch the sheath at the end. See how it's kind of stuck in there? And when you have two hands available like this, hey, that's no big deal. But when this is hanging on a belt on your hip and you're trying to get it out, it's not as convenient as other sheaths maybe are. Now you can, of course, get a second hand down there, but just sort of, you know, it's not extremely comfortable, or it's not extremely convenient getting this in and out of sheath. And it gets annoying, I will say, if you're, for example, I was out working on a little camp area that my son and I have in the bush. And so it involved take the knife out, make some small cuts, put the knife away, do something else. Take the knife out, make some small cuts. And I started to get annoyed by the sheath sticking all the time. Okay, so I do have to say that. Otherwise, very, very functional, extremely cost effective. And as I say, down the road, I will do a comparison between this knife, the SE3 and the BK9, although I'll probably do that outdoors so I can actually show you some cutting and carving and stuff like that. There you go, guys. That's my take on the SCHF 52. Very good sort of middle of the road knife. It's not as big as a BK9. It's not as small and light as an SE6. Very good knife. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we will talk to you soon.